Seems like clutch pedal got upset. Is it because slave cylinder weight expands? Or is it because clutch plate said, peace out? In today's video we have Audi A3 Cabrio 2011 1.6 TDI. I will show you step by step how to replace flywheel, clutch plate, clutch pressure plate, release bearing and a clutch slave cylinder. So let's dive in. I start with my trusty under bonnet light for more light, because more light means more space. Next I remove all plastic covers, starting with battery top cover, front cover, now the engine cover, air intake lid, and intake pipe. Now I'm disconnecting battery terminal, starting with negative side and followed by the positive terminal. Now we have to remove battery bracket that holds battery in place and prevents for battery sliding backward and forward, left and right. So that's the battery bracket with the bolt. And now battery itself can come out. I am now disconnecting this vacuum pipe from the air filter housing and also disconnecting mass airflow sensor. I use hose clamp pliers to remove intake pipe from airbox filter housing. There is T30 bolt that also needs to be removed. Now the air filter housing can come out. It is secured by rubber grommets, so with little force it should come out easy. Next is battery tray. It is held in by 3 10mm bolts. Once those are removed, tray can be removed. To remove gear selector cable, first we need to disconnect them from the gear selector itself. Lower cable being held in place by its retaining clip. Upper cable has no clips, but instead it is push fit. So to remove it I'm using screwdriver to pry it. Next, cable bracket is held by 3 13mm bolts. Before we can lift cable bracket, we need to disconnect clutch fluid pipe bracket, as it will get in our way to lift cable bracket. Now we can lift it up and tuck it away. Next in line is this gearbox mount support bracket and is held by two 13mm bolts. I try to leave bolts either in their original places or with the parts themselves. This way it's more easy to remember where each bolt goes once I start putting it all back together. Now I get access to slave cylinder. To pull it out we need to unscrew these 13mm bolts, and for that I am using extended 13mm socket with flex adapter, as it is awkward to get to it. And on the other side regular 13mm socket will work. Here we can see the slave cylinder gave up and leaked out, hence we have a sloppy clutch pedal. Little bit of cleaning. Next I remove ground/earth cable that is held in place by 13mm nut. And now the starter motor bolt. It is 18mm bolt and it is pretty long as it has to go through the starter motor bell housing to the engine block. And that's the starter motor bolt out. Last two bolts before we can lift the car up, we have to remove these ones. They are 18mm bolts that goes through the gearbox bell housing to the engine block. And that's one out. We can move gear selector to give us a little bit space. Oh, they're pretty tight. And that's the second one out. Now we can lift the car up. Car goes up and the wheels goes down. Now I have to remove wheel arch inner lining the lower part of it. It is held by 6 T25 screws. That is 5 here as we can see, and then there's one at the bottom. Now we have to remove this push clip. Gives me a hard time. Typically now this liner meant to come down, but seems on this car there's like a hook where the liner hooks on. So first it meant to go up to unhook it, and then it come down like so. Now I'm removing under tray, and on this car it is held in place by 5 13mm bolts and 2 Torx T30 bolts. Now the under tray can come down. Keep in mind when removing it, it is not made of light plastic like most cars, but instead of metal. On this Cabrio Audi there's also an extra subframe that we need to remove, and it is secured by 4 M12 multi-spline bolts and 5 M8 multi-spline bolts. So I'm starting with the M12 larger bolts. Now I switch to the M8, as these bolts is harder to get to. There's 3 on this side and 2 on the left side. Now last 2 M12 bolts. This one. And that second one. Now the subframe can come out. Once the frame is out of our way, I move to starter motor. First I disconnect all these plugs. Then I remove this 13mm nut to move this bracket away. Now we can remove the bottom bolt of starter motor. This bolt gives me a hard time. There we go. On some of these engines you don't need to disconnect starter motor completely, and you can just tuck it away or move it upwards. But on this I decided to move it completely. There's a plastic cover and a live wire that needs to be removed to get access to the 13mm nut. So there, nut is removed. Live wire can come out, and the starter motor is out. Once we're gonna get to the moment where we have to remove the gearbox, this intercooler pipe is gonna be on our way, so I decided to remove it. I loosen up these clips and the pipe comes out. Now I remove hood bolt and push it inside to make sure the CV joint is not seized into the hub. Little bit of double D40. And the ball joint nuts can't come out. I now use M8 socket to remove these driveshaft bolts. There are 6 on each driveshaft. Once all 6 bolts are removed, we can knock the driveshaft out of the hub. This driveshaft was seized in the driveshaft flange, so I give a couple taps with the hammer to loosen up. And that's one driveshaft out. To not make a mess and later grab it in, you can use old glue to cover this flange. Disconnect the oil level sensor. And we took the wire away. Now 6 driveshaft bolts on this driveshaft. I use the impact ratchet to speed up the things. Same thing on this side. Push the CV joint in. Remove the ball joint, move the hub away, and driveshaft should be pretty out. And there, both driveshafts are out. Now we move to this driveshaft flange as we have to remove it. Otherwise, when we're gonna move it, it will catch on the flywheel. So I'm using self-grip pliers to grip it little bit. Otherwise, once I'm gonna use the gun to remove the 5mm Allen key bolt, the flange would spin with it. Now I'm gonna remove bottom engine mount, also known as a dog bone. I use the breaker bar to loose bolt loose, and then the gun finishes the job. That was 21mm bolt, and these two are 16mm bolts. And that's it. The mount should come out. Now I'm gonna drain the gearbox oil, as I'm gonna tilt the gearbox once it's on the floor. I don't wanna get the oil on me. Last thing on this side is this 18mm bolt for the gearbox. Now remove these two 16mm bolts on the bottom of the gearbox. The last bolt is this 18mm bolt. We'll leave it as a last and remove it just before we're removing the gearbox. I support the engine with a gearbox jack. Now we can go on top of the engine. Here we have to remove these two 18mm gearbox mount bolts. I'm doing this slowly as I don't want the engine to drop suddenly and to make sure that the gearbox jack can actually support the engine. Let's move back to the bottom. Now we can lower the engine and get access to these three 16mm bolts for the engine mount bracket. So that's the gearbox bracket out. Now everything is out of the way, we can remove the gearbox itself. I asked somebody to give me a hand with this task, but sometimes gearbox can stuck somewhere and you're not going to be able to release it by yourself. And there, gearbox is on the floor. Oh yeah, that's a way too big free play on the flywheel. So I start by removing clutch pressure plate, and for that I'm using 9mm socket. I use a screwdriver to remove pressure plate from its locating pins. And what do we have here? The clutch plate is completely disintegrated. No more material left on it at all. And look at this groove on the pressure plate. I wonder how long this has been going on. Next, I remove flywheel. For that, I'm using M12 multi-spline socket. I did a little cleaning here to make sure there's no damage on the engine block on any other component. Now let's compare the parts. Looks same size. Here we can see the material on the new and an old one. Well, old one don't have any material left anyway. That's release bearing. Now the pressure plate. Let's compare the flywheels. And they look same. They come from same company. And now my partner came and she said it's time for lunch. Back from the lunch, and let's install this flywheel that it seems I got confused from the steering wheel. Seems like I'm driving somewhere. Actually, I'm just looking for the right position so the all bolts align. There's only one way how you can fit this flywheel. I installed this starter motor bolt with another bolt underneath to stop engine spinning once I'm gonna torque the flywheel. The torque spec for this flywheel bolts is 60 Newton meters. On the clutch plate there says which side the clutch should face. So this side should face us, as here is gonna be the gearbox. Some mechanics are using clutch alignment tool, but I used to do this by iron screwdriver. Once the clutch is right in the center, I tied the bolts. I double check if the bolts are torqued correctly, and torques for these bolts are 20 Newton meters. Next I remove all release bearing. I cleaned the gearbox from old clutch dust, and I also cleaned this clutch fork. I reassemble clutch fork by attaching this bottom spring and clip it. And clip the new release bearing in. Keeps coming out. When installing clutch fork back, make sure that the spring gets secure on the gearbox ball pin. Clip the bearing back in, and that's good. I now ask my colleague to help me to lift the gearbox back in. The gearbox in its position. and I'll secure it with that 18mm bolt that I told earlier. That's it. Now back goes gearbox bracket. So now basically we do all steps in reverse order. Lift the gearbox up with all the engine. Now I'm going up to secure those two 18mm bolts. Now the gearbox jack can be removed. I installed two of these 16mm bolts. In goes starter motor. The live wire. The cover for the live wire. The bracket. Intercooler pipe. Now connect all the plugs I disconnected earlier. I pull them to make sure they are located. In goes the bottom engine mount. Now the driveshaft. I secure driveshaft bolts. Driveshaft goes back in the hub. Once the driveshaft is back in the hood and the bolt joint is secure, we can tie the driveshaft bolts correctly. In go hub bolt. Now the wheel arch lining. Ball joint nuts. This driveshaft flange has a spring here, and to put the bolt back inside you have to compress the spring like this. So I'm gonna push the flange in, and at the same time I try to screw in the bolt. Yeah, it catched. Should be good. $18mm gearbox bolt. In goes the left driveshaft. The hub bolt. And the ball joint nuts. I tied the hub bolt and drop my light. I tied the Driveshaft bolt. I plug back in oil level sensor. And I will top it up the gearbox oil with the amount that it came out. In goes the smaller subframe. On goes the wheels. Now two 18mm bolts for the gearbox. The starter motor bolt. Now the ground wire. Let's address now this not so happy clutch pedal. So we need to replace this leaking slave cylinder. I clamped the fluid pipe so no additional fluid can leak out. To remove slave cylinder cell, there is a retaining clip that you have to lift it up. Once it's been lifted, the slave cylinder can be disconnected. But before I toss it away, there is a small seal inside that I need to save, as it doesn't come with the new cylinder. That's the seal. And it has to be pushed onto the fluid pipe. Without it, this cylinder continues leaking and you'll not be able to bleed it out. Let's compare them. Looks same to me. Just push fit and then the clip to secure it. Slave cylinder goes back into its position. Just make sure it is located correctly. And then secure it into position with these two 13mm bolts. Pretty much same way as we removed it. In goes gearbox mount support bracket. And now the gear selector cables. The upper cable just pushed in and it's secured, and the bottom cable also goes in and then secured by this retaining clip. So clutch system needs to be pressurized so the clutch pedal was working as it's supposed to. I opened the clutch fluid and brake fluid reservoir cap, and I'll be using this brake and clutch bleeding tool. I connect it to the brake fluid reservoir. I pressurize now system and I open the bleeding nipple to let the air escape. As we can see, there's plenty air inside, as I expected. I'll repeat this process multiple times till the clear clutch fluid coming out with no air in it. So that seems clean enough. I close this reservoir. And now the brake fluid pipe bracket can go back in. Now the battery tray, secured by 3 10mm bolts. Now the battery itself. And now it's a good chance to put this bracket back on. I connect the positive terminal. In goes air filter housing. Intake pipe. Secure the T30 bolt. Another intake pipe. At the bottom just pushes on, and at the top it slides into the grooves. Intake cover. Intake pipe clamp goes back to its position. Now the negative terminal. Mass airflow sensor plug. The vacuum pipe. Vacuum pipe just slides on. Battery tray. Now the engine cover. Now I put back the under tray. Oh yeah, the pedal now is much better. Let's put this rubber. And on this, I am saying thank you if you watched the whole video. If you like it, press the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel as more videos how to is on its way. Your valued mechanic out.